us to decision number 8 on SADC roaming project as presented under 5.1.21. I submit.
Honorable Ministers, decision number 8, SADC roaming project. Do we adopt the decision as presented? No comment. Adopted as presented. Next.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Next is item number 5.2, facilitating effective competition for the communication sectors. The text runs from 5.2.1 all the way up to 5.2.4, which leads us to decision number 9 on facilitating effective competition for the communication sector as presented under item 5.2.5. I submit.
Do we adopt the decision as presented, Honorable Ministers? Thank you. Adopted as presented. Next.
Thank you. The next is 5.3 on provision of telecommunication resources for disaster mitigation and relief operations. The text runs from the text runs from 5.3.1 up to 5.3.2, which leads us to decision number 10 on provision of telecommunication resources for disaster mitigation and relief operations as presented under 5.3.3. I submit.
Thank you. Decision 10, provision of telecommunication resource for disaster mitigation and the relief operations. Do we adopt the decision as presented? No flag. Then it is adopted as presented. Next.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. The next is 5.4 on SADC television channel. The text is presented under 5.4.1 all the way up to 5.4.7, which leads us to decision number 11 on SADC television channel as presented under 5.4.9. I submit.
Honorable Ministers, decision number 11, SADC television channel. Do we adopt the decision as presented? No flag has been risen, therefore adopted as presented. Next.
Thank you. The next item is 6.0 on research, innovation, and industry development. The first item there is 6.1, implementation of SADC ICT Observatory. The text starts from 6.1.1 all the way to 6.1.4, which leads us to decision number 12 on SADC ICT Observatory as presented under 6.1.5. I submit.
Decision number 12, SADC ICT Observatory. Do we adopt the decision as presented, Honorable Ministers? Thank you. Adopted as presented. Next.
Next is item number 7 on SADC Regional Postal Services Development. The first item is 7.1, update on the implementation status of the model policy guidelines on postal services in SADC. The text runs from 7.1.1 up to 7.1.3, which leads us to decision number 13 on SADC model policy guidelines on postal services as presented under item 7.1.4. I submit.
Decision number 13. Do we adopt the decision as presented? Thank you. Adopted as presented. Next.
Next, Honorable Chair, is 7.2, implementation of SADC Postal Strategy 2017 to 2020. The text runs from 7.2.1 all the way to 7.2.4, which leads us to decision number 14 on implementation of SADC Postal Strategy 2017 to 2020, as presented under item 7.2.5. I submit.
Decision number 14. Do we adopt the decision as presented? Honorable Ministers. Thank you. Adopted as presented. Next.
Next is 7.3, SADC Universal Postal Service and Access Regulatory Guidelines. The text runs from 7.3.1 all the way to 7.3.6, which leads us to decision number 15 on SADC Universal Postal Service and Access Regulatory Guidelines as presented under 7.3.7. I submit.
Decision number 15, Honorable Ministers, do we adopt the decision as presented? Thank you. Adopted as presented. Next.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Next is 7.4, under SADC Postal E-Commerce and Trade Facilitation Guidelines. The text runs from 7.4.1 up to 7.4.5, which leads us to decision number 16 on SADC Postal E-Commerce and Trade Facilitation Guidelines as presented under 7.4.6. I submit.
Decision number 16. Do we adopt the decision as presented? Honorable Ministers. Thank you. Adopted as presented. Next.
Thank you. Next is 7.5, SADC Multi-Stakeholder E-Commerce Capacity Building. The text runs from 7.5.1 up to 7.5.9, which leads us to decision number 17 on SADC Multi-Stakeholder E-Commerce Capacity Building as presented under 7.5.10. I submit.
Decision number 17. Do we adopt the decision as presented? Honorable Ministers. Silence means yes. Adopted as presented. Next.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Next is item 8 on regional, continental, and global coordination. The first item under this theme is 8.1, SADC preparations for WRC 19. The text runs from 8.1.1 all the way to 8.1.16, which leads us to decision number 18 on SADC preparations for WRC 19 as presented under 8.1.17. I submit.
Decision number 18. Honorable Ministers. Okay, South Africa.
Thank you, Your Excellency, once more. On the previous decision 8.1.14, we just need a correction on the first sentence. Ministers are further invited to note that APM 19, not AOM. And we will request also that we include women on the sentence. Thank you so much. Come again? APM, the documents reads AOM, and of course the inclusion of women to the delegation to the WRC. Thank you.
Okay, Secretariat, you have taken note. Thank you. Adopted as amended. Next.
Thank you, Chair. So next is 8.0 on regional, continental, and global coordination. We start from 8.1, SADC preparations for WRC 19. whereby the text runs from 8.1.1 all the way up to 8.1.16, which leads us to decision number 18, as presented under 8.1.17. I submit.
Decision number 18. Do we adopt the decision as presented? Honorable Ministers. Thank you. Silence means accepted. Adopted as presented.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Next is 8.2, outcomes of plenipotential 2018, abbreviated as PP18. The text runs from 8.2.1 up to 8.2.3, which leads us to decision number 19 on outcomes on plenipotentiary 2018, as presented under 8.2.4. I submit.
Honorable Ministers, the decision number 19, outcomes of plenipotential 2018. Do we adopt the decision as presented? Thank you. Adopted as presented. Next.
Next is item 8.3, Southern Africa Internet Governance Forum, abbreviated as SAIGF 18. The text runs from 8.3.1 all the way up to 8.3.6, which leads us to decision number 20 on SAGF 18 as presented under item 8.3.7. I submit.
Honorable Ministers, the decision number 20, do we adopt the decision as presented? Thank you. Adopted as presented. Next.
Next is under 8.4, Honorable Chair, outcomes of UPU meetings. The text runs from 8.4.1